Hi there. It's December the 10th, and we're continuing our journey through John's Revelation, the last book of the Scriptures, the Greek Scriptures, and we're in chapter 2, reading from verses 1 to 17. So this is the beginning of the letters to the 7 churches. Each of the 7 letters that John writes follows a similar format. There's an address to the church followed by a divine evaluation of the church's state, prefaced by the words, I know. Each letter ends with an exhortation for which the Spirit is wanting to be heard by the church, and there's an encouragement to persevere with rewards given to the one who overcomes. And the Greek for that is tonikondi, which means the one who overcomes and keeps on overcoming. It's an active participle. So the first letter we read in chapter 2 is the one to Ephesus. Now Ephesus was the most important city in the region. It was a busy seaport on the western coast of Turkey, and it was what's called the metropolis, the mother city of the region. And so perhaps this is why they've come at the top of the list of churches that the Lord wants to speak to. The evaluation here opens with an affirmation. They're doctrinally pure. They've resisted the interlopers with their false teachings, and they've withstood persecution, and they're still enthusiastic. But the Lord points out the fact that they've lost their first love. What a terrible thing to have happened. That initial, original passion that they had for Jesus has gone. And they're so attentive to the detail of what's correct teaching and what is not. They've lost sight of the one who it's all about, and they've lost sight of the need to experience relationship at first hand. So the call to this church, this Ephesian church, is to turn around, to think anew, metania, this complete change of thinking, this complete change of approach, this homecoming as well. If they don't, they will pass out of existence. They will cease to exist. Their light will be extinguished. In their stickling for right belief, there's commendation also for their resistance of the Nicolaitans. Now, the Nicolaitans were following a heresy that we don't know of. There's no definition of what the Nicolaitans are, but later writers speculate that perhaps it was the one Nicholas who was elected in Acts 6, Nicholas of Antioch, who was a convert to Judaism, but there's no particular evidence for that assumption. But the Ephesian church is promised that if they can persevere, if they can overcome, tonikondi, to the one who is overcoming, they will share of the tree of life in God's paradise garden. It's an amazing promise, but they need to return to their first love. The second church, in verses 8 to 11, that John addresses is that of Smyrna. This is modern Izmir in Turkey. This is also another important port on the Aegean Sea further south along the coast from Ephesus. Now the Lord knows what they're going through and what it costs them to be believers. And yet they are to reckon themselves as rich. It seems they're being oppressed by the local Jewish establishment, who perhaps are spearheading the persecution. Some of them are going to be imprisoned, some might even die. But they're urged to be faithful and to receive the crown finally. To the one who persists, tonikondi, to the one who overcomes, keeps going, and is victorious, they will not experience the second eternal death, the cutting off from God. And then lastly, in Revelation 2, verses 12 to 17, the address is to Pergamum, or Pergamon. Until 133 BC, just 133 years before this time of Jesus, this had been an independent autonomous kingdom. It was 16 miles inland from the Aegean Sea, and it was on an outcrop overlooking the river Caicus. It was particularly known for its Acropolis, its temple on a high hill, and it had a great temple there to Zeus, to the chief of the gods. Actually, this temple is reconstructed in the Pergamum Museum in Berlin, in Germany today. John speaks here in the name of the one whose words, he says, are sword sharp. The words that come out of Jesus' mouth at this point are sword sharp. Pergamum is located where Satan has his throne, and that's probably a reference to this great temple of Zeus, this temple of the false gods that they had established. They've seen martyrdom for Christ in the brother Antipas, who's been killed as a believer. And in spite of their strength, they're still to be held to account. The review of them says that they have been eating idol-offered meat, and they're also slipping into sexual laxity. Unlike Ephesus, they're not resisting the teaching of the Nicolaitans, and that could be connected to some of the sinful activities that John highlights here, or the Lord highlights. This has got to be dealt with, and if not, they could be destroyed by the sword-sharp mouth, the sword-sharp words of Jesus. And in their victory, they will receive God's food instead of that of the idols, and they will receive a white stone engraved with a new name. Perhaps this refers to some ancient tradition of Pergamum, but this time the stone that they will carry the title of the true God, of the one God, of the name, and of the name that describes who they are truly. John, in writing to these churches, or listening to the Lord speaking to these churches, is both encouraging but also is incisive. He speaks to those things which are needed for them to address. We need to be constantly assessing our own lives to be sure that we are hearing God's encouragement for those things that are good, but we're also hearing him where perhaps we need to be constantly keeping alive the fire of our first love. Have a very good December 10th.